This video is brought to you by the Patreon team. Of course, if you want to join the Patreon team, please feel free to click the link down below or at the end of the video. And if not, that's totally fine. Just enjoy the video. Names are truly powerful. We own our own names. We're connected to the identity that they can craft for us as a person, and the identities that we too create for them as names. To some, taking someone's name means you have control of them. Taking someone's name in love means you have an everlasting bond. And even to own or even name something yourself is to tame something from the wild. Names are powerful, and we as humans hold on to names like it's our nature. It's too in our nature as humans to name objects and inanimate items and breathe a whole new life into them just because we've named them and personified them. I often find myself talking to objects that aren't alive. When I'm in a rush and I lose my keys, and I let out that huge huff of stress when I see them and sigh of relief as I scream, "There you are," as I shove them in my coat pocket. Or when I refer to my consoles as a she or a he, and of course you can't forget their fucking coffee table on which I stubbed my toe on so many times, calling it every hateful word under the sun. It's our second nature as people to bond and connect with objects that has caused us some sort of emotional relevance to a situation, and it allows us to express our feelings and emotions through that by personifying an item. But why am I talking about personification of items? Well, I was playing through The Last of Us 2 recently, and it got me thinking about how before this game came out and even after the fact, people were surprised by the fact that all NPCs were given their own names. Many people pointed out the fact that the context of killing someone with a name, it helps you ground a relationship between them and the player, and it makes you feel bad for your actions. There was an interview that I read where Naughty Dog said, all of the human enemies in the game have names. They aren't just faceless goons that you're fighting against, they are real people. And that's got me thinking, is that all it requires to create a connection to the player and an NPC? Is that all it requires to have remorse? Is that all it requires to feel human? Did I ever tell you the tale of Wilson? He was stuck on an island with another man by the name of Chuck, who seemed pretty desperate to survive at the time and get back to his family. Wilson and Chuck started off as silent acquaintances, but over time their friendship grew into something strong, and by the end of the journey they become inseparable. Did I also mention that Wilson was the mental rock for the stranded man Chuck? And did I also mention that Wilson was a volleyball? Castaway makes us as a viewer and Chuck depend on the bloody stern look of Wilson. Chuck's personification of this ball has helped him keep sane throughout his 4 years of being locked on this island. Talking to someone and letting out all his emotions and feelings, in turn keeping his mind clear and keeping himself focused, has worked for him and has allowed Wilson to become alive for his own mental well-being. When Wilson and Chuck finally band together and get what they need to be able to make a raft and escape from the island, just as Chuck is ready to escape, Wilson floats away, but Chuck has to let him go because he has to return to normality.
Wilson! Wilson!
We create names to create a connection. We build personalities out of items when we're most often at our lowest. Studies found that it's a side effect of natural loneliness, and it helps as a way to cope with emotionally tasking stages throughout our lives. So then when I first hear that The Last of Us Part 2 was getting a lot of attention for having names, it made me think that a lot of people have forgotten about the many years of games that have had NPCs with names, and not just only names, but living, breathing worlds that grow around you and adopt to the player's choices, and for me, that's what really makes NPCs feel alive. But let's say if that's all it takes to bring an NPC alive, paste a name onto them and make sure the player feels bad for killing them. As I make my way down the streets of Florida in Godfather 2, seeing every NPC with not just a first name, but also a second name, should that make me feel emotionally different about having to kill them as a goal? If I see Stanley over here just walking down the street minding his own business, and then all of a sudden get my crew to come out of nowhere and beat him to death, should I feel bad for that? If a mission tells me to choke out Richard here minding his own business once again, then I'm going to do it. A lot of these NPCs are given personalities and roles throughout this world, and even given phobias and fears that the player can play towards. Should that make me feel connection to them? Should that make them feel more alive? It certainly doesn't.
I'll try to make this quick for you.
But what if there was games that just showed me a snippet of someone else's life to make me think about my actions towards them and not just see them as a blank NPC? Ubisoft has been always very good at filling their worlds with people and making it feel alive for generations. Assassin's Creed 3 introduced the homestead where Connor meets strangers with jobs and benefits towards the player. Filling up this base location over time, you must do missions and help out these people. But despite every conversation and every act of kindness and every daily animation that Ubisoft painstakingly added to make every character feel alive, I couldn't tell you at the end of the day the name of a single resident of this town. And I personally felt more connected walking around a city with a phone in my hand learning about people's identities. Being able to put a name, a job description, or even some sort of personal problem to these characters, it helps make every single NPC in the Watch Dogs universe feel, well, like people. Recording people's phone calls or seeing their texts, being able to relate to their personal problems and even their personality traits, it allows us as people and the player to form a connection with them. And sometimes there's stories to be told with these people that are more emotionally taxing than most games are really willing to dive into.
I don't know how much longer we can do this. These treatments, they've cost us everything we have.
By diving into a personal response that many could relate with, it allows us to connect to these characters and think about our actions. And taking a look at someone's life as a fly on the wall, we're able to see ourselves within these people in their moments of comfort. Seeing a couple going through a tough time laying on their bed discussing how they're going to go through with the cancer treatment, or seeing an old woman who's had a stroke and it's even told you that she's blind in the left eye being scammed over the phone, it makes you feel bad for her. We connect to these little mini stories and slices of life, and it makes you second guess every single time you need to press X to hack away their money. But there's also this game's biggest issue. How could you have me mentally and emotionally feel something for these characters, but then also have it be the same goal to steal every penny from their pocket? And it's that flaw that doesn't allow me to personally connect with them as people, but instead an objective in my way. But what if there was a consequence for my in-game actions and as my choices as a player? Do you remember walking through the halls of Bulworth Academy and seeing all those students just getting on with their day-to-day routines? The freshman kids keeping their heads down, people getting books from their lockers, and of course the bullies coming right along to pick up the nerds right on cue. The many times you got into fight with Damien West and the rest of the jocks who were just going for a jog around the courtyard, or the many times that you made Christy and Angie get into a fight over you, or even for a matter of the fact the many times you made girls get jealous of you and Trent kissing in the hallway. Bully allows the world to feel alive because of these characters, not because they have names, but because they have personalities that will grow around the character's progress. Rockstar brilliantly makes sure every student, teacher and prefect feels like a crucial part of the immersive experience of what it must be like to go to a school in a place like Bulworth. And if I chose to make that choice to cheat on an NPC in front of another one, they will react to both me and of course the people around them. If I choose to do an errand for someone, then they will remember that and they will respect me just a little more just because the game allows me to connect with these characters in these ways. The game's characters aren't just given set personalities that I must play towards to tick off an objective, but instead are forever changing amounts of respect and even reactions through the player and how they choose to go about their day to day and how they choose to interact with each NPC. Each task and reaction of an NPC is a direct response to the player's journey, and that allows us to connect to these individual moments with each character, from Jimmy's friendly charm all the way to his aggressive flaws. And on the subject of flaws, death, failing, it's an important and inevitable part of what it means to be human. And the way we handle failure, it can be truly a make or break moment for many people's lives. Shadows of Mordor introduced the world to the Nemesis system, making sure every orc has their own name, flaws, and personalities that grows with the player for better and for worse. As I said earlier on, we naturally personify things we're able to create an emotional connection with. And there's nothing more stressful than being hoarded and killed by an orc over and over again, and only to see him get stronger and move through the ranks because of your failure. My nemesis Felgrat was able to get more than a few lucky shots on me and take me down more than a few times. The pure frustration and emotional journey that you could have with a constant returning orc that can and that possibly will come back to haunt you, it becomes a personal battle to overcome all the odds. The nemesis system allowed every player to have their own battles and personal nemesis in game, and the enemy landscape would often change over time with every death and every orc that you defeat. Being killed and having an orc only to remind you that you was a coward of running away, or your inability to be able to actually fight off all that armies resulting in your death, is infuriating. So every time that orc would reappear, the fight becomes less about killing the next orc, but instead proving to yourself that revenge is always sweet and that you're better than them, and you're not going to be defeated by some sort of NPC and some orc which is belittling you at every single moment. And you may not notice, but with every loss, win, or even returning nemesis came both growth and the pure emotional response from us, the player, towards these personified pieces of codes that call themselves orcs. So what does it take to make one feel like a real human being? Is it the attention to details of their day-to-day lives? Is it how our actions and choices create dynamic situations for us to remember them by? Or maybe it's the long journeys and emotionally challenging stories that we build with each individual. Or maybe Naughty Dog is right and it is the screams of fellow friends calling out to each other as you, the player, takes them out one by one. But the truth of the matter is, it's all of them. It's us that make them feel human. We're in charge of the way that we choose to tackle every situation. It's that individuality that we all hold. If we are affected by scenes of people crying in fear, then it's down to us how we react to them. If you feel bad for seeing this elderly disabled woman being scammed, then it's entirely down to you and your choice to change how this scene ends. Wilson the volleyball became what Chuck needed him to be at the right time. When Chuck was in self-doubt, Wilson was there to give him encouragement to keep building a fire. Wilson remained a voice of logic and gave Chuck a way out and gave him a way to vent all his ideas. Wilson had nothing to do with the way that Chuck was able to survive on this island, but instead it was Chuck entirely projecting that side of himself to bring Wilson alive, to give him a name and a full personality that he could connect with as another person. And that's what gaming is allowed us to do. It's entirely down to you how you project your views and actions on these characters, NPCs, and people. And that's what can make them all human beings for us, because we need them to be.
Okay, come closer.
Fucking shut up.
Hello everybody, I hope you enjoyed this week's video. I didn't want to sound like I was being horrible towards The Last of Us Part 2, because of course I understand that for some people it may affect them differently with names of course, but I just want to sort of challenge the idea of what it means to have names in video games and how we connect with them, and this is the gibberish that came out of my mouth. I hope you enjoyed this video, and of course if you did, please feel free to put a comment down below and of course like the video, and why not subscribe for more videos like this every single Thursday, and of course I will then see you at the next checkpoints. Goodbye.